So, today, this is a message I truly believe could change our lives if we could understand and get this right. And this topic today, I realized I'd never really talked about in its form that I'm sharing today. But I was inspired by one of my ministerial students who's in my Tuesday night class who shared a link with me of a talk she gave, I think somewhere around Christmas, it looked like, in her own church. And she is the youth and family director at this church. And she did this story about her life. But as I listened to her in the process, I realized this is something Keir and I and other ministerial students learn along the way, but it's something we don't really teach to help people understand. At least I have not. So I'm going to take a shot at it today. And what she talked about was how she overcame serious health challenges and how she experienced this process called chemicalization. But I'm going to talk about it in a way that I think is palatable for us. So the term chemicalization was introduced by Unity co founder Charles Fillmore. But both he and his wife Myrtle, who was also co founder of Unity, taught a lot about it and they wrote about it. And chemicalization describes the inner process that occurs in us, the feelings and the emotions that occur in us when our old beliefs are challenged by new spiritual truths. Charles explained that it's like a spiritual reaction that occurs in us in the same way mixing chemicals would produce a visible change. And he's taught that at the collision of old beliefs and spiritual principles, we experience this emotional and mental upheaval while we're holding on to the old beliefs and refusing to be changed and transformed in a new way. Myrtle reinforced this perspective by talking a lot about the discomfort that we feel when inner conflict happens. And we all know what that's like. But she said chemicalization is that inner discomfort and that it's a signal or indicator to us that we're growing, that we're about to grow if we would only stick with it and not go back to our old ways and our old way of thinking. She taught that rather than resisting these feelings that are uncomfortable for them, we should welcome them as the evidence of our progress and then remain committed, whether that's through prayer or meditation or forgiveness. Both Charles and Myrtle encouraged us to embrace chemicalization with faith and patience and to trust that doing so would lead us to greater understanding, healing, and peace. Now, if we think about this, okay, think about the last time you were feeling like, oh, I don't know what to do here. Oh, this doesn't feel good. Just think about it. I'm sure you don't have to go far back to feel one. Most of us have these on a regular basis, but we brush them off as though, oh, I'm just having a bad day. But maybe we're actually having growth experience. So when this is happening to us, if we saw it as a necessary step for us to be able to grow, maybe we would understand it better. So let's say we've been telling ourselves for years that we're not worthy of love or prosperity. Let's just say. Then one day we go to church and we hear our minister say that love and prosperity are always available to us and that we're choosing to believe that we're less than worthy. I know I never said that. But let's just say that's what happens. So, in that moment, we leave here and we think, what was that about? Why am I feeling like this today? Well, that's the reaction we need to be experiencing to be able to let this go. But we don't stick with it long enough. And that is what happens when this old belief is challenged by a unity truth statement, such as all is well in divine order. We, on a bad day, say that can't possibly be true. But from a divine perspective, our life is working as it needs to for us to experience what we came here to experience on earth in our lifetime. And often, I believe we spend more time rationalizing why others are wrong, why spiritual truths can't be real, why this doesn't apply to me, than we do embracing our spiritual truths. But what if we aren't right? What if we could change our minds and see life differently? Charles taught that chemicalization is not something we should fear, and he encouraged people to see it as a sign that truth was working through us, bringing about positive changes in our life. Think of it as an opportunity to witness the power of truth at work in our lives. And in a more simple way, think of it as seeing old energy being released to make room for new energy. Now, let's think about this in terms of forgiveness for a minute. How many of us can recall a time when we needed to work through the difficulty of forgiving someone after years of holding on to resentments? Yes, I know more of you feel that way. So think about someone you've been holding a grudge against, something that happened 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, and you're still holding on to it. Think about that. And think back to when you forgave someone or you were working on it. Think back to the feelings you were experiencing, such as waves of anger or sadness. And yet, over time, those of us who stick with it eventually get to that place where healing starts to occur, peace starts to emerge, because we were brave enough to embrace the chemicalization process and not brush it off. And that brings us to the first lesson we need to remember we're going to help ourselves. And that is remembering to embrace this process that occurs when it's happening. It's a natural part of our spiritual growth. And instead of us constantly resisting discomfort, we need to lean in, people, lean into the discomfort and embrace the process and see it as this is my chance to change and let the story go. And to help ourselves, we can meditate, use whatever affirmation we want, but we need to find ways to reduce the intensity we feel without dismissing it. We could also practice eliminating our need to have self talk that is negative. How many of us say nice things to ourselves? It says, how many of us say negative things to ourselves? I would be so rich if I had $1 for every negative thing I said to me. But the truth is, we're hardwired, as I keep explaining, for negative thoughts to occur. They're there to protect us, to save us, to help us, to make us challenge our own thinking. But we can't keep holding on to them. The second thing we need to learn to do is to stay grounded in that truth. We do that through coming to church. We take classes like Keir's teaching today. We show up for the different groups that activities that happen here. But they're all ways for us to anchor ourselves in spirituality. Let's just put this in perspective for a minute. How many of you spend 2 hours coming here on a Sunday, maybe an hour in a class, and then 90 hours doing other things? Right? Okay, whether that's sleeping, eating, talking on the phone, social media, watching TV, going to work, whatever it is. Okay, what are the chances if you spend 2 to 5 hours a week on your spirituality and 90 doing other things? What are the chances you're getting rid of the old story? Slim to none. We have to get in the mindset to say, how much work am I willing to do on myself? And what can I let go of here that's mindless? The mindless stuff that doesn't do anything for us. If anything, it riles us up. Or we're looking for someone to back our story because we're off to rationalize. We're constantly rationalizing why other people act the way they do. What about us and the way we act? What about our story? What can we do for us and stop worrying about everyone else? Whenever old beliefs resurface, we can just remind ourselves that inner wisdom, that divine presence within us, is always guiding us. Staying grounded means we listen and we stop trying to control life and people. And instead, we align our thoughts and our words and our actions with spiritual self compassion, even when emotions are intense or circumstances get chaotic. But it's also important that you hear me say this. When we are staying grounded in truth or working on this, it does not mean that we are denying difficult feelings or what happened. This is not an eraser. We're saying, does it serve me now to hold on to this? Is it helping or hurting me to keep doing this to myself? But we're not denying that anything happened or that we felt it at one time. But how often are those feelings not current? They are not current. When someone, any of us, say a story, oh, you know what happened to us? Is that current? No, it's past. And unless you're still holding on to it because it's helping you, you really shouldn't be telling that story to yourself anymore or anyone else. It's about us holding an awareness that we're growing, that we have the chance to free ourselves from the past, and that we're supported by divine wisdom on a daily basis if we're listening to it. But you got to turn the TV off to hear it. Choosing to see life from this perspective will actually make us more resilient and patient and keep us moving through our own growth. And I know I sound like a broken record almost every week when I say we have to practice compassion. But the truth is, compassion shows up in every topic. We have to be gentle with ourselves and with others and remember everyone is experiencing their own unfoldment. So, how could two people actually understand each other when our unfoldment is different? Our experiences are different, our stories are different. We are not going to be able to fully understand someone else except through expressing compassion and listening to them. That's it. You don't have to relate to it. You don't have to figure it out. You just have to listen and hope others do the same for you. Compassion and kindness, especially self compassion and self kindness, can ease our journey. And if you've ever been part of a support group, then you know that the understanding of other people with similar stories always helps us move through difficult times. But the downside of support groups is we can stay stuck too. You get together with a bunch of people who are angry, that anger grows. It doesn't dissipate. Ultimately, the idea here is that we have to get into the rhythm of trusting divine order. And unity teaches us that even when things seem chaotic, Spirit is working through us and guiding us toward our highest good and greater clarity and peace. You know, last Sunday, Keir gave us a really wonderful message, and he was vulnerable enough to share his own story with us. But he shared how he made a conscious decision during a breakup to have faith in the divine timing of what was happening to him in his life. He expressed gratitude for all the blessings and the growth he had experienced in this relationship. And he trusted that there was a higher purpose unfolding for him. This process of chemicalization invites us to move forward with courage and faith, and to remember that whatever is happening will lead us to greater understanding and our own fulfillment and purpose. And by us applying unity principles and trusting the process, we can transform our lives, awaken to deeper understanding of ourselves, our past beliefs, our current beliefs, and our relationships with others. But maybe, just maybe, instead of us being freaked out by change or stuck in old beliefs, let's try something new. And let's allow ourselves to be changed in ways that will lead us to bring our best to the world and make us feel free. Let's review today's lessons. The power of transforming old beliefs is ours to choose and requires us to embrace this process of chemicalization and allow change without fear. Number two, to stay grounded in truth because the truth will actually bring us peace and harmony. Number three, to be gentle and kind to ourselves because it will make the journey easier. And number four, to trust divine order and let Spirit guide us. And the affirmation I have for today is I am transforming old beliefs. Let's say that together. I am transforming old beliefs. And the quote is from Charles Fillmore. Chemicalization is the process that takes place when truth is introduced into the mind and old error thoughts react, causing disturbance. It is not to be feared, but to be understood, for it marks our progress. So let's take a moment now and pause and take this in. So we say, thank you, God, for giving us the ability not to be filled with old stories to the point of not being able to move forward. To allow us the mechanisms within us that provide opportunity for growth and change to occur. For us to recognize that discomfort is a sign just the same way when we have discomfort physically. And as we move forward, we remember that our need is to sit with the disturbance and allow the truth to be revealed. And so it is. Amen.